In this video, I'm going to explain how to replace an end mill, maintenance our tool holders, maintenance the VF2 CNC machine, and perform any other tasks necessary to create a part using CNC-RP. First, I'm going to go into how to replace an end mill and how to perform basic maintenance on the tool holders. There are three main tool holders used on the VF2, with most of them being a hydro clamp tool holder. I will go over the other two versions which have slight differences later in the video. The first step is to go to your CNC machine and retrieve the necessary tool you would want to change. In this case, we have a hydro clamp holding the tool. To do this, grab the tool holder under the lid to avoid pinching your fingers. Make sure you have a good grip on the tool holder, as it will drop down suddenly once the pressure is released. Next, you should see a button above the spindle. Hold this button to release the tool. Now, bring your tool over to the workbench and insert it into our holder with the end mill facing up. If you find dried coolant on the tool holder, it's good practice to grab some green scotch or other mild sandpaper and scrape it off. This helps keep the tool holder clean and in good working condition. Only do this to the outside of the tool holder, as removing material anywhere near the inside could cause major defects and loss of tolerance. Now we are going to grab our spanner wrench and insert the prong into one of the small holes at the base of the tool holder. Then rotate the tool holder counterclockwise to loosen it. After loosening it enough, you should be able to just use your hand to take it the rest of the way off. You can now set that part of the tool holder aside and remove the end mill from the expansion sleeve and replace it with the new one you want. To do so, grab the end mill and pull up. Make sure to avoid the sharp cutting edges, as they can cut you if you grab too fast. It should move out pretty freely once the hydro clamp is off. Most of the end mills will come out with a collet attached, and there should also be a spacer inside the collet. Some end mills will not have a collet because they already match the diameter of the tool holder, but for any end mill that is smaller than the tool holder's diameter, we need a collet to fill the space. To remove your end mill from the collet, simply pull it out. This can be quite tricky though, as some end mills do not like to leave the collet easily after being in it for such a long time. If you cannot get the end mill out of the collet by pulling, move to the vice grip. Slightly open the vice grip so that you can place the collet down like this, with the top of the collet resting on the vice, while the rest hangs in open space. Then grab a small hammer and a drift punch and lightly tap out the end mill until it comes out of the collet. Once you have removed the end mill from the collet, you are now ready to replace with a new end mill. Some tools, like our half-inch tooling as I said earlier, will not have collets, and the end mill is just placed directly inside the tool holder. But for tools that do have collets, simply insert it into the top of the collet and make sure the spacer is also inserted into the bottom. Once done, insert your new end mill and collet back into the tool holder's expansion chamber. It is important to make sure that your end mill is fully pushed down once inside the tool holder, as if there's any open space in the expansion sleeve will crumple and lose tolerance. This will permanently keep the tool stuck into the tool holder and will cause it to be unusable for any future tool. So it's important to make sure your end mill is fully inserted into your tool holder. Another very important thing for CNC-RP is making sure all our tool lengths reach the desired length at the program. Otherwise, we will crash the CNC machine. So once you have put your new end mill inside the tool holder, make sure to check its height to see what the stick-out length is going to be. If you need to adjust the tool's height, there are a few ways to do so. The first way is to insert a spacer. There is normally a spacer already inside the collet, as I stated before, and this just helps give our end mills extra stick-out length in the tool holder without crumpling the expansion chamber. The next method for increasing our stick-out length is the set screw that you will find inside the expansion chamber of the tool holder. If you look down into the empty space where you would put your tool, you should be able to see the set screw at the bottom of it. Some tool holders might not have a set screw in them if the required length was already easily made, but you can always put in a new set screw if needed. By loosening and tightening the set screw, you will be able to raise and lower the stick-out length of your tool. Most set screws use a 5/32 or 3/16 Allen wrench to screw in. Insert the correct Allen wrench into the set screw and rotate it counterclockwise to raise the height and clockwise to lower the height. Experiment with different heights of the set screw to try and get your end mill as close to the minimum stick-out length that CNC-RP requires. In total, the set screw will give you about an extra 1/4 inch of stick-out length when fully extended. Once you think you have the right height, reinsert your collet and end mill and measure the end mill's length from the top of the end mill to the top of the tool holder. Continue to make adjustments until you've met CNC-RP's minimum height requirement. A quick reminder that any tool you replace needs to be touched off before running a part, as the lengths will not be the same as the last tool you just took out. It is also better to have the tool sticking out slightly longer than the desired length compared to being too short, as the tool being too short will crash CNC-RP. If the set screw and spacer are unable to reach the correct stick-out length, do not put the tool back into the machine. A new, longer end mill will be needed in order to reach the stick-out length. Once your tool is at the correct length, we can now slide the top of the tool holder back on. First, with the hydro clamps, we need to make sure the bushings and both of the plastic rings are on our tool holder. Then put the top of the tool holder back on and slowly screw it down until you can't with your hand anymore. Next, grab your spanner wrench and tighten it until you physically cannot push it any farther. This is a pretty noticeable change, and you will know when you hit the fully tightened state. Quickly make sure that your end mill is not going to fall out of your tool holder, and then you should be good to reinsert it back into the machine. To do this, you will hold the previous button that is above the CNC spindle. By holding this button, the CNC machine will open to latch onto a tool holder. Line up your tool holder so that the open space here lines up with the square here on the spindle. Make sure your hand is under the flanges on the tool holder, otherwise your hand will be pinched between the CNC machine and the tool holder. Then hold the button down and put the tool holder into the spindle. Next, release the button and you should feel the tool holder click in place in the spindle. Slowly let go and see if it stays in the spindle. Once you have put the tool back in the spindle, it is always important to touch your tool off. So do this before running any part. I would suggest doing it immediately after putting the new tool in as to not forget. If you do not do this, most likely a crash will occur as the CNC machine will think the tool is a different height than it actually is. You can refer to the machine setup video for more information on how to touch off your tool. Now you should be ready to run a new part. Next, I am going to go over how to properly maintain the hydro clamp tool holder. First, we are going to unscrew our pull stud from the back of the tool holder. To do this, set the tool holder in the fixture and use a 3/4 inch wrench to undo the pull stud. Make sure to not put too much force on the pull stud, as it is the only thing holding the tool holder in the CNC machine. So if the threads are broken or damaged, it will fall out and cause catastrophic damage. Once you have unscrewed the pull stud, grab some grease and apply a light layer on the threads of the pull stud and the threads on the inside of the tool holder. Now, slowly screw the pull stud back into the tool holder. You should not experience any resistance while doing this, and if you do, take a step back and make sure you are doing everything correctly. If you can still not figure it out, go get an expert to help out. Slowly use your hand to tighten the pull stud all the way down until you can't. Then grab your 7/8 wrench and tighten your pull stud. Be careful not to apply too much torque once again. The ideal torque is around 30 foot-pounds. Once you have done that, we can move on to servicing our rubber bushings. If you look at the expansion chamber, you should see the rubber bushings on the outside of it. The first step is to take the plastic rings and rubber bushings off of our tool holder. Simply use your hand to slowly slide them off. Wipe down the outside of the expansion chamber with a shop towel to clean away any old grease. Now grab your grease and apply a light coating to the outside of the tool holder and apply it to the inside of the rubber bushings along with the plastic rings. Once done, you can begin to put them back onto the expansion chamber. To do this, first place one of the plastic rings on the expansion chamber. Then grab one of your bushings. This can at times be somewhat difficult, and it is very important not to shear your bushing when putting it on the expansion chamber. I find the best way to put the bushing back on is to hook one side of it around your expansion chamber and then stretch it onto the other. Once the bushing is fully around the tool holder, gently push it down until it's fully in place. Then do this with the next bushing, and finally put the last plastic ring on top of the bushing. Sometimes rotating the bushings can be helpful if you're having a hard time pushing them down and into place. Make sure there are no gaps between the rings and bushings. Next, grab your collet and spacer. At times, you might find dried coolant over the collet or spacer. When given the chance, it's important to wipe these off. I would suggest just using a shop towel, as damaging the tolerances on the coolant or spacer could cause damage to the overall tool holder. Now we're finally ready to put everything back together and reinsert the tool holder into the CNC machine. As I mentioned before, this machine runs a variety of different tool holders, including the hydro clamp. The other tool holders are slightly simpler. Another form of a hydraulic tool holder looks like this. It has a set screw sitting close to the base of the flange. Take a 5/32 Allen wrench and loosen this set screw on the outside of the tool holder. Once the set screw is almost entirely out, you should be able to move your tool freely. Replace this tool and retighten the set screw until you can't move it anymore. Lastly, we have a version of a tool holder that looks like this. This tool holder has a clamping nut to hold the tool in place during machining. To loosen this tool holder, simply grab a large wrench and adjust it to the size of the nut. Then start twisting the nut counterclockwise until it is fully off the tool holder. At this point, you should have noticed the tool has been let go. Replace the tool inside of the collet and retighten the nut back into place once you are done. Make sure that it is fully tightened and you can't turn it anymore. If you run into any other types of tool holders while using CNC-RP, make sure you ask an expert on how to properly service these tool holders. The last part of the CNC machine we need to maintenance is the metal chip strainer that is on the back of the slump. First, walk to the back of your CNC machine and find the coolant slump. On top of the slump, where the coolant re-enters from the CNC machine, you should see a mesh that is covered in metal chips. On each side of the mesh, you should see a handle. First, I would suggest putting gloves on, as the handles are usually covered in metal chips. Then pick up your mesh basket. Take it off the sump and dump the majority of the chips into your chip recycling bin next to the CNC machine. Then take off the filter and throw it away. Next, find a new filter and wrap it around your wire frame, and then place it back on the coolant sump. Now you'll be ready to do most of the common maintenance on the CNC machine when you're using CNC-RP. If you run into any problems or scenarios that I didn't mention in this video, make sure to ask a nearby expert for help before doing anything.